Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Growth Playbook with myself, Kim Clark, and my dad, Alan Beaulieu. We are continuing on today in our planning for 2026 with Confidence series. Today's topic is diving into buyer psychology, something that is often overlooked or not looked at the right way by business leaders. And I can say that when I start talking about it with my clients who are owners of your small to medium sized type businesses, they all have this light bulb moment that goes off where they've never quite looked at buyer psychology in this way. So I'm really excited to dive into the topic today. So, Dad, you want to kick it off for us? I'll ask you a question, or do you have any intro thoughts you want to share with our audience before we dive in?
Uh, just a quick one, Kim.
Yeah.
Just this buyer psychology this week's and next week's when we're talking about further planning. We're in the budget season, so this is a time that I hope our listeners are really applying what we're talking about because the it's easy to live in the past and not plan for the future because the past and the media feeds that, and the media tells us a whole lot about the past and makes it sound like that tells us the future. And that's a great way to be out of position for what's coming. So I'm hoping this week and next week we'll be able to really help our listeners and others get ready for a reality as opposed to what has been.
I love that. And you're right in line with that. It's a lot of conversations that I'm having right now where these business leaders, the way that they're planning their budgets or historically have planned their budgets, is every year it's a 10% increase, or every year it's a 6% increase, regardless of any of the external factors that are going on. And so that's, to your point, it's dangerous. And what I've been talking with them about going into the second half of this year and heading into the upcoming depression, you really need to be more in tune with your consumers, your client base, and really shore up your market position and make sure you have a really strong moat around your business and the people know why you versus a competitor versus a substitute product, whatever the case may be. And so I
Yeah,
think all of this falls in line with
that,
that same
it
process.
does. And in addition, for those that have inventory, how much inventory you should be carrying. For those that are not, always abundant with cash, making sure they have enough cash to carry operations. Some people want to hire just because they have a perception of the future, which is a great way to burn through cash. Other people go on expansion projects right before they fall off the planet. I mean, it's just besides meeting the psychology of the consumer is extremely important. That's the sales process, but the CFOs and presidents and such that don't have a clear view of their cash and where they're going, those are the ones who find themselves having to borrow at the wrong time and getting caught in traps and such. It's a very dangerous place to be. And we both know lots of large companies as well as the small and mediums who do that. And it just boggles my mind because then they have to react violently
Mm.
as opposed to have planned what the next year is going to look like. They become very reactive. And in the leadership world, your people's confidence in you is eroded. And it's just, she doesn't know what she's doing. And it can also, this from the sales world that you also participate in. If you say we're going to have 6% growth next year, and yet the economy is working against you, and you'll be doing well to eke out 2%. So budgets are not met, sales goals are not met. All of a sudden, it can be the sales department let us down. It's
Mm.
just, geez, that's a really great thing. And the whole company, looks at them and go, "Why did you guys do your job?" And it's like, they're just trying to stay afloat in a troubled world. And people do that year after year after year. They say, all right, this is what we're going to talk about bottom up forecasting um, in the future. So maybe I should save that discussion, but people automatically can take a bottom up and go add 10% to that because they're sandbagging. So year after year after year, the sales department has no chance and the company has no chance of making their goals. So what do those goals become after a while? Meaningless.
Yeah.
Absolutely meaningless. And confidence in the leadership is eroded because they don't know what they're doing, or they don't care what we think, or any number of things. It's not a team project anymore. It's just I don't know what word to put to ego thing, I guess, or a terrible way to lead, one or the other. But so we're going to talk
Yeah.
about how to do it the right way.
Exactly.
Sorry to be so
Exactly. Well,
long-winded about it. I feel passionate about this though because it's so wrong. So we're going to talk about how to do it the right way.
agreed. And partly with what I heard in there too, though, is that it's lack of preparation. It's a lot of assumptions. It's like you said, looking at the past and just making assumptions for the future based upon what's happened in the past versus putting in the work, putting in the effort to do your homework, do your due diligence, and make sure you truly understand where you're sitting right now, what's going on around you. So that's part of this buyer psychology that when I'm talking with people, um, it's a thought exercise that most people don't take the time to do. But it's very important because it's going to change your messaging and your approach, your go-to-market approach. And it can impact your pricing strategy. It impacts so many different things, and it has a trickle effect that when you truly understand where the mental state of your customer base, then at that point you can start taking action and putting tactical plans in place to meet them where they're at, which is only going to boost your brand loyalty in the end. So it's worth the homework.
Oh, it certainly works. It is on all kinds of levels. There's bank covenants you got to be careful of, and other stakeholders and their belief in what you're saying. I mean, to me, it's mind-boggling that some don't. You can be successful at it because you're incredibly lucky, you're incredibly large, or you have enough cash. But sooner or later, it catches up to people. The boom and bust cycle will cause a lot of people who've been successful for 10 years all of a sudden to go bust because they just thought it was just going to keep going. It's
Yeah.
just, uh, um,
All right, so I have some questions that I have written down here to kind of kick us off and get us started. Do you want to jump into those?
let's do that.
Excellent. Okay. Love the excitement. All right, Dad. So how does buyer sentiment typically shift as we move through the business cycle?
Um, well, there are four phases of the business cycle, which we have talked about in the past, and we generally start with phase A, which is where things are getting better. They've been below year ago level, but they're getting better. And in that part of the business cycle, if you in the second half of that A, the pessimism of the past begins to fade and optimism begins to grow, and buyers will buy more when they're feeling more optimistic about the future. My job is secure, there are raises coming, companies growing. So they will take more opportunities to buy, more risk put on themselves. Maybe it's time to look at a car. Maybe it's time to do the addition. They start planning those things when they're feeling optimistic. And that's a late phase A, second half phase A. They don't recognize it as that, but that's what's happening to them because what they see around them is that winter's passing and we can see some green in the grass for those that live in cold climates. That's what happens. It's spring. Phase B is the best part of the business cycle in many, many ways. That's where life is good. We are growing and we are going, and people respond to that and they get excited at work. And, long as they're not being overworked and asked to work too many shifts and all that kind of thing, they like to be busy, especially if it's a progressive company that has tied a bonus program to output in one measure or another. They're like, yeah, this is great. And, you get this nice spirit going about the company. And it's like, yeah, and everybody's there. Again, if it's a shared, we had a great discussion on open book with Steve Baker, and as long as it's that type of company, it's really motivating to people because everybody wants to be part of a winner. That's phase B. Late phase B is still good for the workforce, but later when you're heading towards the top of the business cycle, leaders who believe that's going to continue make horrible mistakes. It's just like, we're winners, we got this, and we're selling. And they start doing all kinds of silly things, spending money where they shouldn't, buying equipment they shouldn't, introducing new products which are not right for the next business cycle. I mean, they're just all over the map because they're so caught up in look what we have done. And that's when you know you're dealing with a problem is when look what we have done. And it's not like the economy has any impact. It's not like, the rest of the world we're part of the rest of the world. We have done this. And that's hubris, for one thing. And it's going to lead to some real financial problems in a lot of cases, and not in most cases. The next one is phase C, caution phase of the business cycle. Now, at the early beginning of phase C, again, management for the most part doesn't want to admit that that's happening. I've heard too many times people say, small, medium, and large, we're just catching our breath, or this is a healthy pause, or
Mm.
we're really glad this is happening so we get a chance to catch up on orders and, and that sort of stuff, not realizing that they're at that tipping point on the roller coaster where they're about, oh, then we're glad we're not going up so much anymore, not realizing you're about to feel like you're going to die on the, on the way down. And it's dangerous. And spending should be halted, and different business management objectives should be put into place, which is not necessarily what we're here to discuss. The psychology of the buyer. When they see that the economy is shifted to the backside of the business cycle, they go into caution mode. Where leaders can be very late going into caution mode, buyers, I think, are much more sensitive. And
Mm.
then all of a sudden they begin to pull back. And they can be halfway into the backside of the business cycle before they really go, well, sorry, we're not going to buy a car this year. Sorry, we're not going to put the addition on. Sorry, we're not going to buy new skis. Sorry, we're not going to, you pick it, right? They'll buy the necessities. And even then, to your earlier point, they may switch brands or go to more maybe even a lesser quality but a better price because that's really where their thinking is at. They're that concerned about the economy. The last one's phase D, which is danger and down. And I always told folks it was also for donkey because of Eeyore from Disney. Well, wasn't much of an economy anyway. You get this whole, and that's when if they're not doing, they being businesses, small, medium, large, are not doing what you're talking about, changing the messaging and having the right products out there, you're going to lose market share. It's just guaranteed. And if you snub your nose at Walmart and think it has to be sold at, I don't know, fancy stores, pick a fancy store at the mall, they're going to start leaving the mall and go to Walmart because they can buy essentially the same product for a whole lot less. It's not as glamorous, and they may not tell people, they may hide the Walmart bag, but they're going to Walmart. And I actually I find it funny how people do that. They just don't want to be seen going into Walmart. I'm thinking it's the largest company on earth, extremely successful, but I don't want people to see me going in there. Uh, but that's the psychology that people go through. And I'll just reiterate, all right, I'm feeling more optimistic. I'll start to buy. I'm in phase B. I'll buy more. I'm in phase C. I better slow down in my buying. And what I buy in phase D, I'm definitely slowing dramatically down in my buying. And what I'm buying, you bet I will. And then you begin in late A where there's great uncertainty, early A where there's great uncertainty. It's like, I don't know. I just don't know. And that's a freeze point.
Mm.
Because I don't know is definitely where people just stop and go, what's going on? Long
Yeah.
soliloquy. Sorry about that, but I think knowing the mindset of the phases of the business cycle helps businesses and individuals. Because if you know what's coming, you can say, you know what, be a much better time to buy a car if we just wait 6 months. If we keep our ear to the ground, it'd be a much better time to buy those skis, whatever it happens to be. I'm trying to think of the list I mentioned, but whatever it is, bicycles, motorcycles, types of clothes, go on vacation, go to Europe on vacation. You got to know where the business cycle is. We should know where the business cycle is to help you with that too. When did the discounts start appearing? That sort of stuff. It's all there. Just pay attention. It's not hard to find either. It's just you got to pay attention.
Yeah, it's back to doing the homework. And I think that leads us nicely into that was a great explanation of mental state by the different phases of the business cycle. But I was also thinking about what about all those people out there that don't know business cycles and they don't know what phase of the business cycle that they're in. And so there's dangers in there too, because when you're in, like you said, phase C, which is you've hit that peak in your growth, but you're still growing through that phase. And a lot of times people still see opportunities and I'm still growing, and they don't realize that that growth has slowed and they don't realize that danger might be potentially lying ahead for them. So taking it from somebody that doesn't know what phase they're in and just knows the state that what they're feeling at that moment. I have a couple of things written down over here that I think that I'd love to chat with you about and see what your thoughts are on. So that phase A, I have it listed as improvement, right? Like, so I've been in a bad spot in my business. I'm not hitting my numbers. I'm worried, I'm concerned, I'm frustrated, I'm all those things. I see that I'm starting to get closer to hitting my numbers. And a lot of times I have found people at that point are feeling very tunnel vision on short term. They're not focused as much on the long-term strategies for the business. There's a lot of self-doubt that creeps in when you're feeling that way because you've just gone through, I'm not hitting my numbers, I'm not hitting my numbers. What is the right decision? And then also feeling impatient is another. So I was trying to put actual feelings, the words to identify the feeling. So I came up with that tunnel vision on short term, self-doubt, and impatient. Um, when I find myself getting closer to hitting numbers, but I'm still failing to hit my numbers.
Yeah. Let's go back. What are feelings? What are you talking about?
This is the buyer psychology episode. We
Oh,
have to
okay.
talk about
Okay. I got it.
feelings. And
So I
it's
go
all
from,
about feelings because in your messaging, you got to do your pain points, right? And I think it was Matt that had coined the term for us. It was pain grenades, where you don't have to hit it right on target. You just have to be close enough with your messaging so that way it hits home, if you will, on how you are feeling, and resonates with how you're feeling.
right. And the reality is that's much more your world dealing with the customer and their feelings. I have spent my career with leadership and decision making and trying to get them apart from their feelings because I have found most often their feelings are wrong and their feelings at the changes in the business cycle are certainly wrong and will lead them to make mistakes. So I've been spending all my time going, I don't care how you feel. This is what the rates of change is showing, the lead indicators and your market trends are showing. So let's talk about that, not your feelings. But in your world, you have to talk about feelings and
Only because it's helpful in making sure that you build that brand loyalty and
yeah,
you attract your customer base, whatever type of business you may be. If I know that my customer base is feeling frustrated right now because activity is lower than they would like to see, then I'm going to adjust my messaging so that way it can either give insight that can give glimpses of hope, or it can give advice on how to navigate that frustration, or it can give thought leadership as to when when that period they're in currently right now is coming to an end. So that way it gives them that light at the end of the tunnel and it's not a train. It can remind them to also still think longer term. While you might be frustrated over X right now, next year is going to be Y. Start planning today. So there's all these different, it makes it so that way you are not tone deaf in your marketing and in your messaging. You're relating and giving advice and guidance to help them navigate those feelings that they're having.
yeah, absolutely. And I agree with everything you said. And I particularly like the next year approach because marketing doesn't change immediately. It takes time to develop the message, to get it out there, get the process going. So if you're not thinking in our world, I think you'd agree that if you're not thinking and living 6 to 12 months ahead, you're behind. And that's hard for people to adjust to too. So that's why the previous discussions on lead indicators are so important and on rates of change are so important because it's a mathematical process that makes you think about the future. And the I think and I hope and what the news is telling you becomes a lot less important when you have empirical evidence. And what we always talked about and you know this, is employment. When the employment numbers come out, people respond, and the employment numbers were weak, and we know that that just tells you how things were a year ago. It's a it you look in your rearview mirror, you know with a lot of confidence where you've been. No idea where you're going, but you have great confidence in where you've been. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misleading information out there. Not that they're doing it on purpose. It's not nefarious. It's just, I don't know, habit, don't know, whatever it sells, whatever it happens to be. I don't know. It's like
Well,
watching the
and
stock market and think you can see the future because what the stock market did this week. It's no, doesn't help. Forget
no,
that.
don't do
That's
it.
right.
Well, and you're exactly right. That's why we started our series talking first about rates of change, so that way folks following us can understand what is that and how do you do that. And we provided resources on that episode. And then we dove into the leading economic indicators and general expectations for 2026. And gave again some resources, mentioned some resources on that episode. And we we structured the series in this way because you can't understand the buyer psychology for 2026 without doing that homework first. You have to calculate the rates of change, get the business cycle information, use the leading indicators, and do some of that analysis to know your end use market customers are going to be feeling what next year because of based on where they are projected to go based upon those leading indicators and the rates of change. So
Right.
and so we did structure it this way to, all right, we've done our homework. We now have that empirical evidence of where we expect them to be in 2026. Now, what psychological state does that mean that they're going to be in next year? And that's what we're encouraging executive leadership and marketing teams or whoever it may be to do these exercises right now because you're in that budget planning phase for 2026. That's what I'm working on with all of my clients. That's what Ryan's working on with all of his clients. It is this very data driven order of operations so that way you can have the most accurate plan going into the new year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think probably I have not mentioned enough. One of the keys to this is to see what has happened within your companies. You look back historically. You've gone through these cycles before. So you go back to the last time you were in kind of a soft period, let's call it a mild D or a late C, and then you start going up again, and you go, all right, what do we do right? What we do wrong? And then you dig into your own data, what's sold better, and what do we do with prices, what worked, and you can do a self-analysis that really helps you prepare for the future. And did you lose market share, gain market share? I mean, you got to ask yourself, 20 questions as you go through all of that, but you look at your own past and then understand. And I love this part because we've seen it hundreds of times. You'll hear from leaders, good, smart people. Well, it will be different this time. Then why did
Why?
you go? Yeah, why? Because we have a new plan. We didn't plan in the past because we
Right.
have a new product. You didn't have new products in the past because we have a new CFO. Oh, that's the cure. I mean, you gotta ask the why. And often it's just because we want to believe it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
history, present, future. Your rates of change present. Your future is the lead indicators, your past, what happened to you in the past, should allow you to put together a plan that says, all right, we can maintain market share, we can grow market share, we can see that they're making mistakes over there because they're planning for today to last for a year, and we know things are going to get better. So we can get ahead of them. And we can position ourselves as a market leader while they're still trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Powerful.
Very powerful. And that actually is something we'll dive into further in upcoming episodes when we start talking about the competitive analysis. The series is pretty long because there are many steps that need to be taken right now at this time if you're planning for 2026. So that way you can build an all-encompassing, robust plan for the coming year. Jumping back to the buyer psychology, I had a couple of other ones, a couple of other keywords that I wanted to throw out there and just get your reaction to. So when in phase B, you were saying that you're growing strong, everything's great, everybody's excited, the team is celebrating. Some of the words that I put down were confident, ambitious, pride, gratitude, spending increases, and risk tolerance increases. I'm curious your reaction to those words.
I think they're all true and normal. I mean, I think it's to be expected because we live in today, and human beings are straight line forecasters. So, if the last 3 months have been good, the next 6 months are going to be good, and so all that happens. And the risk tolerance struck me particularly loud because you're willing to take on more risk, and that's part of the undoing when you get into phase C, slower growth. Uh, if I may give you a quick story, there was
Yeah.
this company. I really liked the leadership, the CEO, I should say. And I was called in and I told them that they were going to be next year, they were going to be in phase C. And then by the end of the year, they'd be in phase D. And he says, that's really bad news. And I said, why? He says, because we're building a new factory. It's in the next town, but we're building it and it won't be done until next year and we can't stop it now. They had done no forecasting, no 3-year outlook. So they just building this new factory. He said, I'll go talk to the board. So I said sometime later, how'd it go at the board? The board said, oh, simple. They just said, we'll sell more. This was a
Huzzah!
fairly large company building a fairly large plant who had a not professional board, a lot of family members who said, all we have to do is sell more. And I was like, I looked at him and I said, good luck.
How confident are you in that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just got to sell more. And we've heard that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's misleading, and that's kind of where the pride comes in. That's why I put
Yeah.
that word in there.
Yeah.
You'll have other people that take the other end of the spectrum, and that's why I put in gratitude. You have some leaders that will feel grateful that business is going so well, and will look to find ways to keep it going so well. And again, all of this is to adjust your messaging to your markets and meet them where they're at psychologically. But even more so, as I mentioned, like you can have different pricing strategies based upon where you're at. You end up wanting to it helps you know when to launch new things and when not to launch new things. So if your markets are all feeling confident, ambitious, and their risk tolerance increases, that's a great time to look to add something new into the marketplace, versus when they're feeling tunnel vision on the short term and self-doubt and reserving cash, frustrated and impatient. That's the time to establish stronger relationships, be a helper, show them that your hand is here to help them along during this difficult time. Um, and that can all be done through your sales initiatives, your sales enablement tools that you put together, your thought leadership pieces that you put out as part of your digital strategy, and even fundamentally as part of your pricing strategy that you're putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And all that actually, not actually, all that works. I mean, that's just reality when you do that.
Yeah.
And I just think that as your clients and people in general, businesses in general respond to this, they can take 2026, which will be on a macro basis, mild rise. Um, I get that from numerous sources. And then my own analysis and what I'm looking at, mild rise, which will not be universal because that's a median. So there'll be plenty of exceptions to the rule. So you get ready for two words there, mild and rise. and and that's how you'll be profitable throughout that time period. Um, and if the second half of the year, which is, 8 or 9 months away is not going to be good, you'll know in time to adjust your sales on your ship because those lead indicators and your rates of change will tell you. Your banker won't know, and your sales team won't know, and your customers won't know. They're all reading the same from the same sheet music, um, but you'll know.
Yeah. And part of this is doing that same analysis. I just want to be clear. I alluded to it before. That same analysis that you were talking that leaders need to do on their own business, doing it on your end use markets as well. I mean, that was something that every year I would look to see how are different industries performing like that we have a big customer base in. And what is my expectation for the next year for them? So it's not just looking at where my rates of change are and what the leading indicators are saying for my business. It's also doing that same analysis on my customers so that way I can know, again, future psychological state of my customer.
Yep, absolutely. Um, I can give you another example of that if you'd like, and that is a business that sold high-end ladies' handbags, very high-end, the kind when your mother looked at them and wanted to buy them, I scowled.
Not a
And
Walmart handbag.
yeah, no, and it's just my nature to go. It's just a handbag, so I don't understand style, colors, and all the rest of that stuff. Not who I am. So, uh, but I found a leading indicator for her. I just disparaged the stock market earlier, but using a 12-12 rated change for the S&P 500 became a great indicator of what she, who owned and ran the business, could expect. Um, and the first question was, does the economy make an impact on the high-end purses? And we definitely showed yes,
Mm.
it does. And how can I know? Because you lagged the stock market by a few months. So using 312, 12, 12, she had some indication, not as much window as a lot of people would like, but she could at least know not to keep spending and start making plans and be quick to adjust, agile. Um, so even as something as fairly narrow as high-end purses, there's a way. And so in a company, if you have a diverse base of products that you sell, you may need to do it on a product basis, but you can adjust and protect yourself and your employees.
Yeah, and I was just thinking in that particular example, because it is very specific and niche, when she sees that her business is going to be going through a period of slower growth, that is then evidence of the consumers having less disposable income that they want to spend on high-end purses. And therefore, like what would cause that? So that way, again, just trying to get to the buyer psychology of her clientele if they're buying
Yeah,
luxury purses.
they were they were not the ultra rich, but they were wealthy, upper income, upper middle income, lower, really high income. So they weren't the, 0.1 percenters. It was people. So when their stock market and their wealth went down, um, they just cut back. It was as simple as that. And became an extravagance instead of oh, sure. Um, so I don't know if there's a marketing message that overcomes that so much as a leadership message to prepare for it.
Hmm.
Uh, or you have a line of bags that is $500 less than your $2,000 bag that
Yeah.
would be acceptable.
Yeah, that's where my head jumped to is having what is your other like good product that you start pushing more during that period in time, or even maybe it's promotional, where you take less of a profit margin on your sales and you start putting out some promotions so that way people feel like they're still getting a deal. Where I might not have spent 2,000, I might not have spent 2,000. Right now I might spend 1,200 because it's a really good deal and it's only going to last this season or something.
Right. Yep. Or have somebody sell it out of the trunk of their car in New York City on the corner.
Plan C.
Plan to, yeah.
Oh. All right, Joel, I've had a lot of fun chatting through this with you. Just looking at the time, I think we're headed towards the end of today's episode. Are there final thoughts that you want to leave with our audience on the buyer psychology?
Yes, as a company, you can know in advance most of the time what the buyer will be thinking 6 months from now. And that gives you all the competitive edge that a person would want.
And it's worth the time and effort to figure it out.
Period.
All right. Well, thank you for chatting through this with me today. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun, indeed. Well, ladies' purses and falling off of cliffs. We covered a lot of stuff today.
We did. We did a good job.
Bye.
Bye.